Welcome to That's a Reach podcast, where we sit down to talk through questions about the Bible, theology, the gospel, and more, and how they influence your everyday life. You may have had these questions yourself, so we hope you find this conversation encouraging and clarifying in your pursuit of Jesus. Welcome back to the That's a Reach podcast. Taylor is out of the country. He is in Greece for the next 12 days or something, doing it's like a discipleship kind of following Paul's missionary journey type of a thing there. A bunch of people from our church are there. So he's out, but we have a lot of our friends from Latvia that are here with us for the last week or so, and we wanted to take some time and have a discussion about doing gospel ministry in different cultures. So we also invited our friend, Pastor Justin McKenzie as well, who grew up in Latin America and has that context in his mind. So wanted to just ask some questions about what it is we can learn from those cultures and what's missing from our understanding of gospel ministry, but also what we can learn to when we interact with somebody from Europe or from South America, how we can better minister to them as a neighbor. And as a believer in their community. So, Jilly, what kind of questions do we have today?
So our first question is for both of you guys. So just whoever wants to answer first. What are some of the difficulties of sharing the gospel in where you're from, just compared to what you've seen here, or just what makes it hard?
Well, she pushed the mic over here, so I'll go first.
No pressure.
Just talking about, first of all, I grew up in Guatemala for 10 years, from the age of 7 to 18, and also a year in Costa Rica. But I've also traveled to South America, and I guess over the course of the questions, I can just kind of talk about both Central and South America from what I've experienced. But in terms of just how the gospel is easy ways to engage the culture, or how to understand that better. Is that the question again?
Yeah.
Okay. So, first of all, from my experience, in the time that I lived there, the people are just so inviting and so welcoming. And so it's very easy to engage with the people and develop relationships, and they're just very quick to invite you in and let you become a part of their family. In Central America, and in South America, it's even more so, especially in Brazil, where if you're from the United States, they are hanging on every word because they look to the United States to just as kind of the trendsetters. And so I've even been asked, do you know LeBron James? And I'm like, yeah, we kick it every Friday night. But they just have this, they see us as just kind of this culture that they want to be like and they want to know more about. So they're very open to just hearing anything that you've got to say. So how about Latvia?
So yeah, you can't really put Europe as a culture, like one culture.
Yeah,
so I will speak specifically for Latvians.
Would you, so yeah, Europe is very different, but there's also a difference between Eastern and Western Europe. Just in a general idea, Eastern Europe, where you're from, would be different than Western France.
Yeah,
as
definitely.
As far as the culture goes, or England especially. So I think what your perspective, I think, and just in terms of generalities, if someone ran into someone that was from Lithuania, even though that's not Latvia, it would be more similar than someone from Spain.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, because, Eastern and Western, just to give it a little bit more of a broad stroke. But, so you grew up in Eastern Europe.
Yeah. So,
in answering to that cultural idea, so then, what are some of those difficulties in gospel ministry there?
So since we were under Soviet Union, our culture grew up skeptical about a lot of things. Because Latvia itself, we only had our 100th birthday recently, so we only got our independence back recently. And I think kind of our parents, since they were under all of that, that kind of transfers also to us, because I'm 23, I'm not that old. So yeah, we are kind of reserved, and talking about God is not really a common thing, maybe, because a lot of people don't want to hear it. We are also, I think, a Catholic or Lutheran country, so a lot of people have associations with that kind of stuff. So when we talk about God, they think about an altar and a church where you can't move or speak. You have to sit tight and just listen, and then maybe throw a cross over your shoulders or stuff like that. So a lot of people, I would say, think about God more as a religion than like a relationship with God.
Yeah.
So yeah, it makes it difficult for us to go on the streets and, for example, invite somebody over to church, because we also do have Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses, and people kind of get a bad impression also from them. So, for example, if I were to go up to somebody and they have already talked to a Mormon before, they will kind of already be closed off.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to open up a conversation with people that associate God with something uncomfortable. So yeah.
Earlier when we were talking, you were mentioning how the difference between what you've experienced so far in American church culture over the last week or so versus where you grew up, how people there would be turned off when something pushes them out of their comfort zone. Do you think that is, you're talking about the history of Soviet rule and, you know, parents and the other elders in the community, and do you think that that's something that you've inherited from them, that's just like any sort of push on someone's comfort zone is a turnoff to the gospel?
I think definitely, because for you, a push out of your comfort zone is kind of encouraging. I think, like, if someone were to push you out of your comfort zone, you would take it as them trying to help you widen your horizons or stuff like that.
Yeah.
For us, it's like, why are you trying to tell me what to do? Because that's what we had under the Soviet Union. People weren't as free as they would want to be.
Yeah.
So our parents grew up in that. And of course, newer generations are becoming more open and friendlier. Like, what is the newest generation?
Gen Z.
Gen Z, or
Alpha?
or Gen Alpha is like my kid's age. Like the
Okay,
younger
so
ones,
Gen Alpha, they're completely different from us.
Yes.
They are friendly, they're open to everything, talkative and stuff like that. Us, we are mostly
introverted.
Introverted, we don't like attention. We like to sit and for nobody to come talk to us. But I think that even though we are very reserved, people still want like relationships deeply inside. They maybe don't want to admit that.
Yeah, it's just how God made us.
Exactly, because we were made to be in relationships and fellowship. So when somebody comes to church, the first thing would be for them to not want anything, but slowly as they build up like the tolerance for people, I would say. They want like fellowship and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think just how you're describing that and what we were talking about earlier, in my mind, it's almost like I would assume the opposite of what a Latin American culture is, because they're known as being much more verbose and like forcibly friendly, versus the way that an Eastern European culture would be more standoffish. So like how is that when it comes to just that very difference of, like you're saying, people want to be, on the surface they want to be left alone, but they know they need relationship, but then on the surface in Latin America, like, you're not going to be left alone.
No, and growing up there and coming back to the United States at age 18, I learned, I mean, it took a little while, but I got some weird responses from people as I would be around them, that I finally figured out that I was way too close inside of their bubble. Because in Latin America, it's not uncommon to give a kiss on the cheek and a greeting, or just hugs, and standing very close to people. And I think you guys are all laughing because I think I still do it.
Oh yeah, totally. And because you're
but-
making Aivita uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But just
I mean, you've
describing
never
that.
tried to kiss me on the cheek, so we're
Yeah. Okay. Now it got weird, but that's just how the culture is, and so they're extremely friendly and inviting, and so it is now in the United States, with some of the Hispanic population that's here, it's a lot more of a tribal. They've kind of come together and they're very family focused and concentrated,
Yeah.
and so that is a beautiful part of who they are as well. Whereas much of the culture here is kind of, family is optional. It's a lot like, oh, we got to go see my family again. I mean, they live for community. They live for going to the park and spending time. And so if you get into their, world, they're all about it. And so the church is there, and the church is the way that we do church here. Very different. Is that an upcoming question, or are we already?
No, totally. That's you're tracking though with
Yeah.
kind of what I was wanting to point out, the cultural differences and how those things can be a hindrance to gospel conversation, kind of a roadblock, because at the heart of everything, like Aivita said, like we're made for relationship, we're made for community, but there are just differences in how culturally we view those things, that if you approach it wrongly, you're going to turn somebody off, or just be, going down a path that's really not going to lead to a productive conversation. Because what we want to do is to be a good neighbor and to understand how people are different, and being different's not wrong. Like, it's not wrong that you grew up being more loud and open with your friendliness with people, and it's not wrong that you grew up that way, because that was a legitimate response to be quiet and reserved when you're underneath Soviet rule. But just being able to understand that and respect people in that, but then also, what does the gospel have to say about that? Because, we should have good, loud, friendly, loving relationships with people like that. And so as an American, I'm not as reserved as an Eastern European, but I am more reserved than a Latin American person is. And so it's like, man, I could use some more of that in my life, and then as an American looking at a more reserved culture, it's like, man, I'm probably a lot less quiet and contemplative, knowing that I'm a very extroverted person. Sitting and being quiet and contemplative is not easy for me. And so it's one of those things where it's like, even as in my personal discipleship, I could learn from a different culture in that regard, and being able to do that. But I've had some experience, because as we were talking about earlier, I've moved around the country a lot. Grew up in Oklahoma, lived in New Orleans, and then went from New Orleans to Omaha and then Des Moines. And all three of those cities are, New Orleans especially, is like 90+% Catholic. And Omaha is also very heavily Catholic, and so is Des Moines. Both of them also have a lot of Lutheranism and other older traditional church cultures as well. And I would say you were pointing out the difference between a modern or a classic or old school high church traditional church approach, and how one of those would be a turnoff to somebody, or another one would be more interesting to them. So, for instance, to kind of set up my question on that, when we were in New Orleans, everyone, they were sprinkled as a baby, went to mass a few times, and then they don't really care about religion anymore. And so when we invite them to church, because we started a church plant, a Baptist church plant down there, and my wife and I were a part of the team inviting people from our coffee shop and things like that, they weren't interested as much about coming to church. And when they did, it was inside of a like bare bones brick bar that we were renting on a Sunday, and that was not church to them. And so it was really weird. And at first it was a turnoff. But what they were more interested in is inviting them into my living room for a small group, for a Bible discussion and dinner. They thought that talking about religion and eating food, awesome. They're down for that all day. But going to church, quote unquote church, they were not interested in that. And so we saw a lot more fruit in evangelism through small groups because of that, because that's not, they didn't want to, their idea of church was so different. Whereas in Oklahoma, I don't know if we've explained the idea of the Bible Belt to you in Oklahoma. Is that familiar at all?
I think someone said it, but I don't exactly know what that is.
So it's mainly people in their mind, it's the South, just in general, the South of the U.S., But I think there's also a case to be made for like a line that separates South United States and Northern United States, like from Oklahoma to like Nashville and like Greenville, South Carolina, like those states going across, and then some of those cities like Tulsa and like Nashville and other places where there's just huge church populations. So because of the huge church population, someone that they probably grew up going to vacation Bible school, they probably grew up going to Sunday school because grandma drug them there or whatever. And so to them, me inviting them to Evergreen to come to church is not that big of a turnoff because they've done church before. It was fine, whatever. And so they actually might be a little bit more weirded out being in the Bible Belt, me inviting them to my living room for dinner and to talk about theology. Whereas when I was in New Orleans and when I was in Des Moines, that was the better option for reaching people. So anyways, that's my perspective on it because I've been in just different American cultures. So for you, that idea of what turns them off, traditional versus modern or classic church or whatever, what's that like? And then how do you evangelize, get around that stumbling block for people?
Yeah, so we don't have a lot of modern churches. So for example, the church we have is modern, but since we don't have our own building, we rent a church building that was built in 1906, I think. So that's for us like a basic church building. And so usually when you invite somebody to church, the first thing they think of is an old Catholic church or a Lutheran church. So that turns them off.
Yeah.
But the other funny thing is, so for example, you said small groups are inviting for your culture. For us, that would be like a cult thing. And like
funny.
One is bad and the other one is worse, maybe even. So I think the sweet spot for us is to have like what my church is doing, like try to modernize the Sundays itself and maybe the youth nights, because I think Latvians, even though we don't like big crowds of people, we feel more comfortable coming to like a youth night than going to a small group, because in a small group you can't hide. But when you come to like a youth meeting, okay, there are like 30 people. I can go in the corner and no one's gonna see me. So that's kind of like the sweet spot. So we don't do really small groups for youth specifically. We do small groups for like church people themselves. But usually newcomers don't go to small groups. They come to Sundays, and slowly, when they feel comfortable, maybe meet a few people, start building friendships. That is when you can invite them to the small groups.
Small group isn't a very good evangelism tool in that, as far as inviting new people and trying to share the gospel with them.
Yeah, I think the best approach is to invite them to Sundays and to like events throughout the week. But still, I would not say that it's like the easiest thing for us. Especially, you can. So, for example, you said before, specifically for youth, you have these campus ministries. For us, it's not the same because a lot of schools don't even allow you to talk about God. So, for example, when I think your team came, or AJ's team came like 5 years ago to Latvia. Yeah, that would have been AJ's group. So when they came to Latvia, the school that I was attending back then, I was back then in high school, I was young. So yeah, my school didn't allow them to talk about God. They could, so they came to like English classes and they talked about themselves, like about America. And then they said, if you want, there is an event later that you can come to, but they didn't say that it would be a church event. So some would say that that is misleading, but at the same time, if they would allow us to talk about God, we would just say, if you want to hear about God or stuff, you can come this Friday. But they didn't allow us to do that. Some schools allow it. It's not like an easy thing for us. Some are more open to it. Some are very reserved. I think a lot of people also have had bad experiences with other churches. Because, like I said, for you, in Tulsa, we drive like 5 minutes. Oh, there is a church. Another 5 minutes. Oh, there is a church. And your buildings
Not
are
even
very
5 minutes.
Exactly. And your buildings are very modern, and your worship is very like modern for nowadays. For us, it's not a common thing. Like I said before, if you come to a church and you see drums, that is like, wow.
Yeah.
Something's different here. And I think that kind of stuff invites people. So if you don't change the word of God, that is something you never change, but you can change the approach, how people see like the worship. You don't have to have like a choir nowadays
Mhm.
for people to feel like, oh yeah, this music is nice. So that's the kind of thing we do. We try to make the environment look nice, and but not do like a performance. That is not
Sure.
a good
Yeah,
approach.
yeah.
Just make it seem like it's professional.
Uh-huh.
So yeah.
Yeah. So there's some things that are worth changing, like having more modern music that might not be a turn off or scare off a Latvian. But then there's other things that, such as the more intimate small group approach, that would be so not normal for your just normal culture that it would be kind of a scare. Be like, oh, that's weird. You
Yeah.
guys are weird.
There are some people that have come to our church through small groups,
Uh-huh.
but if we have like an attendance of 150 people, I would say maybe 5 of those people or maximum 10 have come through small groups. So that's not like a big percentage.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and like you said about the worship, I think that has been one of the main focus points that keep people in, because not because it sounds nice, but because it looks different and
Mhm.
it's more inviting than just listening to one person sing in a monotone voice from a book.
Ancient hymns. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Because you can sing hymns, but just make them a little more
Yeah.
modern.
Yeah. We love old hymns around here.
Yeah.
Just with guitars and drums
Yeah.
too. Interesting. Justin, so on that same idea, what's aspects of the normal church tactics that in a Latin American context wouldn't work, like the whole small group versus modern worship versus whatever? What would be a turnoff?
Well, I grew up in different areas of the country where, much like in the United States, it's just there's some different, the demographics of where it is. It just makes there's different, foods, different ways that people speak, and then just different ways that they go about their day. But most of the churches in the villages that I would go to, it's very unorganized, and time is a relative thing. It's like, it starts around this time, and people may trickle in, 30, 40 minutes, and the service may actually start 40 minutes after whatever time you set. Yeah. And so one of the beautiful things about it is they love music. It doesn't mean necessarily that it may be appealing to the ears at times, but that's the beauty of it as well, is that they sing with everything in them, and they don't care what they sound like. And it's as odd as it is for someone like us to come, where we make sure we only hit the note that we know we can pull off, so that the person next to us doesn't not come to church next week.
Yeah.
They just belt it out. And so not a whole lot of instruments, because not a lot of people can play.
Yeah.
Just in the experience I've had, but also a lot of people cannot read. So if you had a bunch of reading sessions where, and I'll say this, most of the men, and even in Nicaragua and other places we've gone, Honduras, it's primarily the women that can read. And so when these men come to Christ through different outreach events, like we've done medical outreach events, and also just any kind of charity with food and things like that, that really draws them in. Music draws them in. But I would say just structure would kind of push them away. I think that, much like in your experience, Matt, it's primarily Catholic background in the whole, anything south of the United States. And so a lot of rules and religion, and so they go there to get fed. So I think it's something they very much enjoy saying, you mean I can read this for myself? You mean you can just share the word with me, you personally, not coming from, the priest in the church? Like, how is that? Okay, you mean I can have this kind of a relationship? So really putting on, to answer your question, just to put it, through the relationship, saying, look, you can have this relationship as well. You don't have to just go get whatever they decide to give you. This book is for everyone.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Is just thinking about the timing of things. I've served in along with some African churches, and with some Hispanic churches, and both of them are very loosey-goosey with timing
Yeah.
as far as
Yeah.
schedules go.
Yeah.
Is that the same case when it comes to the established Roman Catholic Church that's in Central America and South America? Are they a little bit more flexible with their time, or?
Yeah, I mean the masses I think are just kind of set up to where if you miss this one, you just kind of pop into the next one halfway through. But yeah, I mean it's just a very easygoing on when you show up and it didn't matter how long I lived there. I never got used to that. I was like, wait, so if they showed up 30 minutes later, does that mean we're leaving 30 minutes late? You know, I just couldn't quite ever just grab that and say I don't want this for my life going forward. I like the punctuality, but it is just a way of living, and there's something beautiful about that as well, because their stress levels are extremely lower than ours.
Yeah, they don't have the anxiety we have. Yeah,
they don't, and they're just thankful for what they have, which isn't a lot. And so there's a lot to learn from their culture as far as that goes.
That's very cool. I have a question for you. So you had mentioned it just flew away. You mentioned that you were attending a different church, and now you guys are renting a church building. So how did your church plant start? Like, what got you guys together to move on to start this new church?
My pastor should be here. So I started going to church when I was 14. I don't come from a Christian family. I started going to youth nights, and our pastor, Torms, was one of the youth pastors there, and he also was a pastor on Sundays. And I think God just kind of spoke to him that he wanted him to plant a new church, because I think church planting here is not that like rare. In Latvia, that's not a common thing. And actually, when Toms went to the other churches like leaders, and when he said that he wanted to start planning a new church, they didn't have the best reaction, because for Latvians, I don't know, maybe it's our culture thing, maybe it's just a church thing, but it was kind of like, why do you want to separate something good? And they kind of thought that it wasn't from a place where Tom just wanted to reach out to more people. They kind of just thought that it was like, I don't like how you do things here, so I'm just gonna go.
Like it was competition.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And of course that wasn't the case. I think Tom just kind of reached the ceiling of his limitations at that church. So he started listening to God more, and he just kind of felt that God's wanting him to plant a new church. And then when he said to the leaders that, okay, I'm gonna go start planning a new church, he came to some of the people and said that, hey, if you want to stay here, it's fine, because he did have some closer relationships with some of the people, but he did tell us, don't come to the new church just because you have a good friendship with me. Go to the church where you can see yourself being useful and being in a ministry. So at that time, I was a youth leader also in the other church, and I prayed and kind of felt that God was inviting me to go to the new church. So we planted the new church in 2017, and we started with, I think, 20 people officially. And for me, this was something new as well, because we rented an old shop, like a building. Well, not a building, it was like a room. It wasn't very big. I wouldn't know the parameters, but for us that was something completely different, because as I said, our churches are very traditional. And my mom, who wasn't a believer back then, when we had our first public service, she came to the church, and we were driving home, and she was like, that's not a church. That's a cult. The pastor's putting his hands in his pants pockets. Nobody does that. There are no columns. There is no altar. Wow. What even was that? What church has blinds? Or what do you call?
Yeah, blinds. Yeah,
those are blinds, right? So my mom had a complete culture shock.
Yeah, and
that was, I think, a common thing for most people, and that's why also when we started the new church, we went under the Baptist denomination, because for us also it's like, if you're not a part of these specific denominations that are official in Eastern Europe, then people also have a harder time going there because they think you're a part of a cult.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
for example, I heard that Evergreen started from 12 people meeting just in a room, and then you grew and grew and grew. So for us, I don't know how that would... It's definitely possible, but I think it's harder for us to be like, hey, we have a church in our living room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we need like official space, I would say. It's
Yeah.
not definitely impossible.
Yeah.
It's just harder. I
Yeah,
would
it's
say.
just it's a different culture. Like,
Yeah.
compared to what I was dealing with in America, in a Roman Catholic city in America, where they didn't want the high church stuff. That was a turnoff for them. So yeah, going to the living room sounds awesome.
Yeah.
They would love to do that.
Because for us, we are very punctual, and we like official things. We
Yeah.
don't like something
Sure.
that's out of the box, I would say. So yeah, that was my mom's first reaction to our first space that we had for our church, and then we rented a different space from another church, which was a little more traditional, but also not like traditional. And then the place that we have now is like very traditional for us. We have an altar, so my
Yeah,
mom would be
yeah.
happy now.
we had similar reactions to when we were in New Orleans, especially when we had our friends that grew up in New Orleans, and then their New Orleanian parents, they would come and visit, especially because they would come to, like, their kid that was like a young adult would come to faith, and they're gonna get baptized, which that was a big problem because, well, you were sprinkled as a kid, you don't need to be rebaptized, and so that was always a big thing. But that was usually their same reaction was, that's not a church, like, where's the icons, where's the robes, and like, yeah, it was always this big thing. But then over time, a lot of them, their heart really changed because they saw our heart, and it wasn't the external stuff that made it the church. And it's playing the long game, but eventually they see the reality of what's happening there. Well, we pray that they do. Not all of them do, but some of them would see that reality of the heart of the gospel ministry that we were doing. So that's cool.
Yeah. So, Justin, the church that you grew up going to, and then the one that you went to when you went back to Central America, right? Or however that worked.
Yeah.
How were those churches started?
Oh, yeah.
Do you know?
Oh, how were they playing? Yeah.
Yeah.
Those that was actually a part of my my parents' ministry. So usually my father went to school for agriculture, and so what he started out doing was just going out to these villages and helping the people rotate their crops and use fertilizer and just the things that they weren't doing to keep because they rely on their crops each year. And so it was just a ministry bridge to share the gospel. He used to take a generator out to some village 3 hours up in the mountains, no electricity, and share a gospel movie. It was a movie called Infierno, which means hell, and it was terrifying. I still have nightmares about it.
Really?
But I mean, it a lot of people were just available to listen when you help them, when you're there, just getting to know them in a relationship. And what came from that was, after spending time in a village, he'd be gone for a couple weeks and come back and then go again. He, through meeting the people in the area and finding out, who had the gifting to be a pastor, and kind of they'd just find a home and start with 4 or 5 people, kind of like, what you guys started with. And, we would go on Sundays and visit them. Sometimes we started with, they used this pine straw for the floor just to give had a clean smell, and sometimes it was outside, but it just very, very basic, but they love to worship. And part of what I really enjoyed about being in those church settings is just the people spontaneously just sharing testimonies of what God's done in their life, and being thankful. They're constantly just, I'm so thankful to God for this. And that's not something that we just naturally do all the time. But yeah, really the church planning happened organically through, the relationships. And then, the Lord would just point someone that maybe my dad was either discipling or that had already, been in the faith for a long time and grown in his walk and was ready for the next thing. And so, but yeah, and they took a while to grow, but once you get a few members in a family, it seems like, the rest come alongside that because they're
extended
very
family.
Yeah.
It kind of just all happens one way after the other.
So
Interesting.
Very cool. I think what's cool, just listening to you talk about the church in Latvia and everything, like, I don't know, you talk about the difference in, like, here we're like push you out of your comfort zone for the Lord, whatever. And you mentioned how like pushing people in Latvia out of their comfort zone is a huge turnoff. And I think it's so cool just hearing the difference in cultures and how you guys are still showing them the love of Christ, and even like if you don't have everyone in a small group, like they're still hearing the gospel through the Sunday service or through youth or whatever it is. And I just think that's really cool just because it sounds like it's very different from how we do it, but you guys are just doing what is not distracting from the gospel. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I think the people that come to our church still want to go to a small group. It's just that that's not their first step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We use the analogy with, so I was in the church plant world for a long time, but we use the analogy of like front door. Like that's the front door. Like,
yeah.
So here, front door is big church. But when I was serving in New Orleans, front door was not big church. Is it
probably charity events and things like that?
Being connected, like community stuff, because New Orleans is such a festive and outgoing culture. It's much more similar to Latin America. I met some Caribbeans down there, and they said they referred to New Orleans as the Northern Caribbean because it was such a similar culture. But yeah, being connected to the city and showing that you actually care about your place in the city, and then inviting people because it's such a hospitable culture. So inviting them in to my living room was a good thing. It's not just because they didn't want to go to church because they grew up Catholic or whatever, but it was they want to invite me to their house as well. And so me inviting them to my house was the obvious natural thing. So yeah, which is different than here. We were talking about suburban culture. It's just a little bit different. People have their own little houses with their own, attached garages that they pull right into their house, and being detached from their neighbors is not. It's not good, but that is the culture that we're in suburban Bible Belt culture here. Yeah. Whereas New Orleans, no one had garages. We all parked on the street and had to walk to our houses from blocks away because there wasn't enough parking. And yeah.
Well, I think we like to be alone. Americans in general, we like our alone time. We like our alone setting, and so it's a lot more for the Central American culture or even Brazil. They want to be together. Even the families, a lot of, I don't know if it's this much, if it's this way, the way that it was, say, even 10, 15 years ago, but kids are staying in the homes longer than 18, 19. They're there till, into the 20s, which is everywhere else in the world. That's how it is. So families are a lot. They spend a lot more time together. And I think we're always like, well, as soon as the kids get out of the house, we're going to have our own time and our own space. And
change the room into the workout room and kick them out and all that stuff.
Because we're just busy.
Which I noticed that culture difference when Kiva and I lived in Omaha. We lived in one of the Hispanic neighborhoods, and there was family parties in the park down the street from our house, like every day. There was a different family having some sort of party.
Barbecues.
Exactly. All the time.
And can I just mention one more thing?
It's allowed, yes.
Thank you. So when we were talking before about what draws our culture to churches, so a thing that we do that I don't think a lot of churches do, we have like this testimony time each Sunday, because for a lot of our people, I think it's like, well, you're the pastor. Of course you talk about God.
Yeah.
So we have this testimony time almost every week, except for the first Sunday, when there's like this free mic. So we invite people to tell testimonies. It can be something big, it can be something small, it can be the story of how you got saved, or it can be a story of how God helped you. So what did you say? Yeah.
That's awesome. I love
so
that.
And I think that's also a thing that our culture really loves, because it's like, hey, that's not a pastor talking about God. That's
Yeah.
somebody who's just a regular person like me, and God's in their life, and I hear
Mhm.
them doing something. Because recently we had one woman, she was pregnant, and throughout her pregnancy she had problems, and she kept on coming to testify, and at the end the baby did die. But still, I think people come here and they're like, wow, this is something real. And it's not like only the good stuff, because I think sometimes we talk only about the good stuff, and then people kind of get disappointed when something bad happens and they're in a relationship with God.
Yeah.
But here it was like, hey, I still went through something bad. I still want for all of the church to be a part of this.
Mm.
And even if God didn't do it the way that I wanted to end, he's still here. And I
Yeah.
still will testify that he is a good God.
Yeah, the testimony of God's comfort through the brokenness of life, and the comfort that comes through the body of believers that can't be replicated in the world. That's a huge testimony, and I think that's interesting that you make that connection with your culture. That because we were talking earlier about how you know, at least, well, it sounds like in Latvia, it sounds like in America too, that we can compartmentalize our religion, and that's this one separate thing, and it doesn't bleed over into my everyday life.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that I can understand, that we relate to the European culture on that, and we could probably learn something from that about allowing more opportunity for sharing of testimony, to kind of break down that barrier and realize, no, like this is for everything. This is like life revolves around this stuff.
We do the prayer requests all the time, and hardly ever hear the praise side of it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
True.
lots of prayer requests, but yeah, getting the updates on the prayer requests is good too, whether it's good or bad. You know, even if it's the negative thing. But praising God for the comfort that we can only draw from Him. I was curious, what do you think? That's one of them. It kind of plays into my question of what can we learn from the cultures you guys are familiar with and the approaches that you take there that would help us in sharing the gospel more effectively with our neighbors here.
Yeah, I don't even know if it. I mean, I don't know if it's a different even technique or strategy. I mean, relationships are just key in both or in all. You know, people really don't care what you know till they know that you care, and we've seen that even in our outreach events here with Hispanic communities or whatnot. It's just everyone loves food, so it's always a good connection point to break bread and talk and give time to really see that people they generally know that you do care about them, and then without an agenda, right? I mean, that's usually just because the friendship and the relationship's gone long enough. It's like, why are you doing this? And what's the catch? And it's just showing the love of Christ until they want to know why.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that, I think that almost breaks any cultural boundary. I think that can win out, just showing irrational love, like why, like over the top to the point where it's like, this doesn't make sense. And because that's exactly what Jesus did for us. Just
and to show them it takes time to kind of live that out, to show them that this is not just a organizational compulsion that I have to do this. Like you said, people have experienced with Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses, where they have boxes they have to check of this many people they've talked to and this long of going out and doing that. That doesn't exist for us. Why do we do it? Because I believe this is the truth.
Right.
And I believe that you have value and worth, and your Creator wants you to be in relationship with Him. And as a person made in His image, I also love you for no other reason than that. And that it takes time to prove the validity of that.
Yeah. I would just add one more thing with it is, we can often get real structured, and we have 2 songs here, and then we're going to go to this and we're going to go to that. There's something very freeing in letting the Lord move within the body of believers to share these testimonies, kind of like what you were talking about. And just, I guess they can teach us to be let go of the reins a little bit more and just let the Lord move in the time that we spend in worship. And because it's a beautiful thing when they just let it all go. And I'm still probably gonna respect the people around me and not belt out my my voice as loud as we can during the service, but there is something beautiful about how that's what we should be doing. Yeah. It's just singing with our whole heart. And so there's a lot of things that I truly believe they can teach us in both the Central and South American cultures. So.
Yeah, interesting. I would tell you, is this your first time in America?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've spent decades in both places, Justin, so you're able to kind of speak a little bit more to what Americans can learn from it. But so I have, if you don't have anything to say, I have a similar question though. What do you think, what's like a big culture shock in coming to America and then seeing just the American church experience and all that? What's been a culture shock for you that was like, wow, I can't believe that it's like that?
The fact that you're very friendly.
The fact that we're all friendly?
Yeah, like even now, Phillips and I had a little bit of time. So we went to this other church building and it was closed. But this one lady came outside and she was like, oh yeah, we're closed today, but do you want to see the whole church building? And she just let us inside and she let us see all of the everything. And I was like, wow, this was so easy. Is that because we're tourists? And she's just like, oh, Latvians, come inside. Yeah. But yeah, because like I said, we are very reserved. And I think in your culture, if you don't know a person, you will think good things about them and wait till they prove you wrong. For us, it's the other way around. We will think the worst of you, and you have to prove me wrong so I can think good about you. So that's kind of like, I would say the biggest like cultural thing. At least I think so. Of course, I'm one person. But yeah, you're a very friendly country, and you have this thing where you don't just say hi. You say, hi, how are you doing? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, do I answer, or was that like just a greeting? Yeah, because I think
do I just think it?
Exactly, because for us, I don't think we have a lot of small talk, like some, but it's basically either we don't talk or we talk like we are interested in what you are saying. Yeah. Here it's like, okay, she asked me, how am I? Does she really want to know, or was that like a hi, how are you doing? And just like bye.
Yeah, no, I get that.
Yeah, so that's like the biggest thing. And maybe the question that you had before, what can your culture learn from my culture? I would say that sometimes I do have the feeling that for you those kind of questions are just like really how should I put this?
Just automatic.
Yeah. And that you don't even care about the answer maybe. And I think sometimes maybe for your culture that is like whatever, but for us it's like you're a hypocrite if you're asking and not expecting to receive an answer and listen. And I think sometimes you can be very you don't go really easily into the deep stuff. Like you can talk about like the surface kind of stuff, but maybe not go like deeply in. But that's just from what I've gotten from like the couple of days experience that I have in some YouTube videos.
Yeah, that's
so
funny.
Yeah,
I think, you know, even as a lifelong American, the hypocrisy of it doesn't bother me because that's where I've grown up. But you can tell when someone asks that and it's legit. Like, you know, they genuinely are like, it's you and them. They actually want to know. Like, you can tell there's a few people that you run into that, wow, they genuinely care about what's going on or whatever. But yeah, it's funny because there are like cultural colloquialisms of things that we'll say of, you know, oh, like tell your folks I says hi, you know, and like those types of things, like, oh, how are your folks doing? It's like, do you actually care? You never met my mom. Like, why are you even asking about my mom? But that's like a normal thing.
Yeah, we would never do that.
Yeah.
And when you were talking about hugging each other, I was like, if I were to hug a Latvian that I don't know for the first time that we have ever met, I don't even know what the reaction would be. Like, just like,
you get punched.
Okay, maybe not that bad.
Yeah.
They would just go stiff.
Yeah,
like,
they would go
who's
stiff.
This crazy?
They'd be like, this is not normal.
I will say, I think Americans could learn how to be a little more intentional. Like you're right. I think it's very common for the greeting to be, hi, how are you? With no expectation that you're going to answer it. I mean, I was walking past someone the other day, not here, and it was just like, hey, how are you? And like they answered me, but then like they keep walking, and as they're like 5 feet behind me, they go, "Yeah, I'm good. How are you doing?" Still walking, and I was just like, why did I just like say that? Because I also didn't totally care how they were doing. You know what I'm saying? So
Julie,
I think
so rude.
I know, but that's my point. I'm like, I think Americans could absolutely take a page.
I mean,
out
if
of
it's
that book.
fine for your culture, it's fine. Just if you, for example, come to Europe on a missions trip and you do that, we could take it the wrong way, I think.
Yeah,
especially if
absolutely.
someone doesn't know your culture.
Yeah. Good to note. Which is, that's part of why I was wanting to have a conversation with you guys, because America being what it is, especially living in the Tulsa metro area, we're going to run into people from Europe and from Latin America.
For sure.
It's inevitable. And so how can I learn from these types of conversations so that I can be a good neighbor to those people when they come to my country and stay in my country? I want to be a good neighbor to them and make sure that I'm not foolishly putting up roadblocks to gospel conversations with them. I need to be ready for some loud hugs and conversations with Latin Americans, and I need to be ready to kind of prove myself as a genuine caring person over the long haul with a European that might think that I'm shallow and, not actually worth their time. So just got to be ready for those types of interactions. And I think that's something that we can just intentionally do. And even talking about our own culture, the way that we are as a Christian, as a disciple maker, thinking evangelistically, taking the time to live as a living sacrifice and to sacrifice my time and energy. So when I do ask those questions, that I can be that guy who is genuinely asking, and they can tell I genuinely care about you, and I want to know how your folks are. I want to know about your life because, hey, you matter. And if I intentionally have that type of a heart, as an American, we would take notice of that. And at first it might be weird, but then they would genuinely start to want to be my friend because I showed I genuinely cared. I don't think I'm normally that guy, but I know guys like that. There's guys on staff here that are like that, where I know they genuinely care. And that's an area that I definitely could grow in as well. So, well, anyways, we were going to wrap up, but I realized after we started, we never got your official name on the recording.
Everyone already knows.
So first of all, one, who are you? And now that we're at the 40 minutes into the podcast, who are you? And what's the name of your church and the city that you serve in?
Okay, so hello everyone at the beginning, at the end of the podcast. So my name is Aivita. That's how you pronounce it in Latvian. Although I've heard very funny pronunciations of my name here in America, like Avatar. Yes, Justin calls me Avatar. I'm a young adults leader at our church, also a worship leader, and my church is from Liepāja, Latvia, and we are a young church. We just had our 7th birthday in October. I'm sorry if I got that wrong. Hopefully nobody knows the real answer. What else did I have to say about myself?
What's the name of the church?
Oh, the name of the church? Well, we call it Liepājas Centra Draudze, which basically means Liepāja center, like city center church. But usually when we come to America, we just say city center church because that's just easier for all of you.
Cool.
So yeah.
City Center Church.
City Center Church.
Yeah, in Liepāja?
Liepāja, yeah.
Did I say that with a good American accent?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not judging because I have like an accent while I'm talking in English, so probably best for me not to judge you.
Pretty minimal, to be honest. Like,
really?
Yeah.
You did great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think a lot of Latvians, if you come to Latvia, we have like this really thick accent for older people.
Yeah.
So instead of this, we say zis.
Yeah.
Which sounds, I think, almost Russian, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't like the like.
They don't like that.
Yeah, and also you have like this a lot for a lot of the words, and you rarely hear Latvians like do that. Yeah. I think I tried to do it, but it doesn't also come naturally for me. Yeah.
I told Giannis he sounds like Gru on the Minions.
I don't know who Gru is.
Giannis. Oh, okay.
Giannis Dziri? Is that the one?
That scheduled your trip and made
it shout out to you, Giannis. Did you know he messed up our tickets?
Yes,
No, I haven't heard that.
Is this like a part of the
go ahead.
Sure, why not? So story time. Giannis bought us the tickets, and we went as 2 different groups. So my group went from London to here, and then there was the other group that had the pastor and 2 other guys, and they had a flight from Copenhagen to New York, or at least they thought that it was New York. Turns out there are multiple airports in New York. So they got off their flight and they were searching for their terminal and couldn't find it. And then Thomas looks at his tickets and they're like, we have a different airport that we have to go to. They took a taxi cab. They drove for an hour. They paid, I think, over 200 euros for the taxi.
Yeah.
And also, it turns out that Giannis didn't pay for the baggage, the checked baggage. So they had to pay extra for the checked baggage as well.
Oh, gosh.
So that was a really fun time for them.
Man, international travel.
It's horrible.
It's not easy.
He's awesome.
Well, yes.
Awesome ways.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. So that was a horrible experience. And also, I don't know how Scott and Martha do this like every year.
Yeah.
Because we had
it's a
4
lot.
flights. One of them was 10.5 hours. And for the 4 flights, I was the only one who didn't sleep. I slept for like 20 minutes. And the rest of the team was trying to sleep. But then when we came here, I fell asleep like a baby.
Yeah.
And they all had
you're
problems.
exhausted. Yeah, man, that's crazy. But Latvia is not very big of a country, like space-wise. And so, because we were talking earlier, because like...
I can Google it if you want.
From here, from Tulsa, it takes me about 12 hours to drive to New Orleans. So that's nonstop driving, 12 hours. So, I mean, like...
I think you can get from... So Latvia, it's like horizontally wider than vertically. And I think... So I live in a coast city, so I'm on the... What's this direction?
The west?
Yeah, so I'm on the west side of Latvia. I hope I'm saying this wrong.
Wrong?
I hope I'm saying this correctly. So I'm on this side of Latvia, and for me to drive to the other side, I think it would be 7 hours. Yeah, so from one one border to the other, like
That's crazy.
7 hours, maybe 8, but around that time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Des Moines, where I just moved from, was 7 hours from Tulsa. So it's about a 7-hour drive, driving up through Missouri and Iowa. So
Not a lot of mountains, though.
So
between here and there, cornfields. It's cornfields between here and there.
Cornfields.
So total area of Latvia is... I'll give it to Justin for him to say the number. Too complicated for me.
Yeah, 24,938 miles.
Wow.
So that's the whole area. So not big.
Not big.
That's crazy.
Yeah, maybe about the size of New Hampshire or something.
Yeah.
Really? Oh my
I don't know.
goodness.
I just guessed.
That's what I mean. Yeah. Or America's funny like that. We have so much land.
Yeah.
You know,
True.
it's crazy, and
Yeah.
the states are all so big.
And one thing that also I'm not accustomed to, you drive everywhere. You have like highways.
Yeah.
You call them highways, right?
Yeah. Generally. Yeah.
Yeah, everywhere. And it's so crazy to me that you can't just go to the store in like 3 minutes, because for us it's like, oh, you need milk.
It's a whole event.
Yeah, because we were talking about this in movies. You see like a neighbor go to their neighbor's house and like, can I get some sugar? And I always thought, that's so weird. Why not just go to the store? Obviously you can't.
Yeah.
Because for us it's like a 2-minute walk. You get the sugar and you go back home.
Yeah.
It's about the size of West Virginia.
There you go.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy.
That's pretty small. That's pretty small.
All right. Well,
that was I was gonna say that was my experience when I did live in the very old city of New Orleans. It's not full of highways, and a lot of my New Orleanian friends didn't have cars. They just rode their bikes or walked to the store or whatever. So it was a similar thing in that. But yes, Julie?
we should probably wrap up.
Yeah, I
think
know.
this is a
We've
very
got
long
guests,
episode.
and so we're going long today.
You can cut out all my
when Taylor's
parts.
away, we will have more fun.
We're keeping those Avatar.
Less
Avatar.
scheduled when Taylor's gone.
Yeah. Okay, so Aivita, thank you so much for joining us, and Justin, thank you for joining us. I said that right?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
Close
Nailed
enough.
it.
Ivita.
Good enough.
Aivita. Dang it! Oh my gosh. I literally was sitting over here like, I'm pretty sure it's Aivita. Aivita, thank you for joining us. It was awesome talking to both of you. And, yep, we're going to end it awkwardly like we always do.
Yep. It's not lunchtime, though.
It is
but
not lunchtime.
Normally
it is, in
is.
fact, 3 o'clock.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for joining us on That's a Reach.
We are pastors and leaders from the Reach Young Adult Ministry at Evergreen Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and these questions come from those in our young adult community here. If you're from a different church and context, we hope you found the discussion beneficial and edifying as you pursue spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ in your culture and context.